afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. Shall we get started? So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Eric Malice. I am the co-founder of National Test Systems, and I'm also the Chief Product Officer here at National Test Systems. Excuse me. We've been in business for coming up on 25 years. I think 2026 will be our 25-year anniversary. Go us. And ever since my brother and I started this company all those years ago, he was the one who was very good about business. He was able to focus on making sure we had inventory, making sure we were getting paid. He was good at sales. He was good at all the stuff that you would normally think of in running a business. I didn't care about any of that stuff. I was more interested in the technical side. I've always had an interest in science. I've always had an interest in chemistry. And that's really was my focus for the past 25 years, was learning as much as I could about all things drug testing, all things clinical toxicology. How do the drug tests work? How do drugs affect the human body? What's that chemical reaction like? I wanted to understand everything. I wanted to really be able to get a better grip on what it was that we were providing to people, because it just seemed very, very interesting to me. And luckily, we've come to a place, especially with technology, that we're able to share our 25 years of knowledge and learning with you guys. And that's why we do this. National Test Systems as a company is very education forward, very education focused. You can buy a test cup on eBay, but the second you have a question, you're not going to get an answer. I'm sure of that. I've tried. So the point is, we really think education is very important. I see a few of you, some of you have given me, half an hour of your afternoon to maybe learn something new. And that justifies what I'm doing. That vindicates me. I'm not the only one who wants to understand these things better. I want more of you to understand these things better. So I do appreciate you, first and foremost, for giving me some of your time this afternoon. You guys have a job. So do I. Although this is my job. Anyway, so we are basically, like I said, very much an education-focused company. We bring you these webinars really in hopes of making your daily drug testing duties a little bit easier, or at least a little bit more insightful. So we've got about 20-ish minutes or so on our presentation today. And after that, we'll get to any questions that you post. If you see on the left pane of your screen, we have a people button and then a questions button. If you would go ahead and put your question in there whenever it comes up, you don't have to wait till the end, but just know that I am going to wait till the end before I actually take the questions. So, and then if for some reason we're unable to get to all of your questions, for some reason we run short of time, or I see people dropping off, like I need to get back to work, no problem. Just know that your consultant will reach out in the next couple of days, and they will answer any questions we missed. Also, at that time, they're going to give you an opportunity to request topics for future webinars. They'll also give you an opportunity to request a one-on-one training with me and your staff, or me and you, either on this subject or a different subject entirely. There's a lot of information here, and some of this you may want to dive a little bit deeper into. That's absolutely great. We love that. Anytime somebody comes to me with the intent of wanting to do something better or understand something better, that's when you have my full attention. I will do that all day long with you, because that is my favorite thing about what I do. I love to share the information that I've gathered over the past 25 years, but let me not fool anybody. I'm still learning. I hear a lot from you guys and I go, oh, that can't be right. And then I do some research and then I learn. So after 25 years, I still learn something new at least every week, if not every day. So please continue to come to us with questions, concerns, something you randomly read on the internet. I'll address anything as long as it's somewhat in relation to what we're doing here in clinical toxicology, especially as it relates to drug testing. So with that in mind, what are we talking about today? Today, the big short answer of what we're going to discuss is the importance of laboratory confirmations. We're going to discuss the different methods of confirmation. We're going to discuss how it's different from screening. And with that, you're going to learn some information about how a screen works and some of its limitations. You're going to learn some of the real-world implications and cross-reactivity. You're basically going to learn everything that differs between a screen and confirm, and why that confirm is so important. But before I tell you the the technical side of things and what you will know versus what you don't know once you get to the end of this webinar is the main reason, because the instructions tell you so. If you were to read the instructions of your instant test, which nobody does, I get it. Nobody ever has. That's what I'm here for. I read the instructions and give you what you need to know. But if you read the instructions, one of the things it says is any presumptive positive result needs to go to laboratory for further confirmation. Now, listen, a lot of times you'll get people admitting use, and then that's usually fine. But if you don't send it the confirmation and there is an argument and it goes to court and you're on the stand, then the lawyer's going to say, let me ask you this. Did you follow the manufacturer's recommendation on the test you used? And if you haven't sent to the laboratory, then the answer is no, or perjury. So just a little scare tactic, but that's really not the focus of what we're doing today. We're going to actually talk about why lab confirmations are helpful, and not just because we said so, because I don't like that answer either. And that's why I would never just give you that answer. So let's discuss about the real reasons, real world examples of how laboratory confirmations could be very beneficial, if not crucial, to what you guys do daily. So the first thing, let's familiarize the difference between a screen and a confirmation. Now, let me back up just a second. Most of what we're talking about today is regarding urine testing. We all know there's plenty of other specimen types. I see some names when I logged on that look familiar that are probably doing sweat patch testing or hair testing or oral fluids testing. You know, these are all viable specimens, but they come with their own set of instructions. Because our base of people who we interact with on a daily basis, their primary specimen type is urine. That is going to be our primary focus on this webinar as well. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about obviously carry over, and I'll point it out where I can if it fits. But we're really going to focus, especially when we talk about metabolites, we're really focusing on the urine. So keep that somewhere in the back of your head. All right, so the first thing, what is a screen? So a screen, whether it is an instant cup, a dip, a pipette, whether it is a desktop analyzer, you may have heard the term ELISA or EIA. These are all screening methods, and all these things have one thing in common. It is a chemical reaction. So basically, anytime something enters your body, whether it be vitamin C, whether it be sugar, whether it be cocaine, whether it be diesel exhaust, all these things enter your body and they create what is called an immune response. Your body, I read a great comparison. I wish I bookmarked it because I could never find it again. But basically, your body has what's essentially bouncers. That's the best way to describe it. Your antigens go up and be like, halt, who goes there? Oh, you vitamin C? Yeah, we could use some of you. Half of you come with me. Half of you go that way. And your body basically will create enzymes that are very specific to the substance that they are reacting to. So if you take vitamin C, you have a very specific enzymic reaction that creates a very unique molecule, typically an antigen or an antibody. And what that enzyme does will basically break that substance down to the parts that it needs and the parts that go to waste. Or if there's parts that they need but they have too much, the rest goes to waste. Same basic principle. So the way an instant test works is it has a chemical that is meant to react with the antigen that your body would create upon ingesting that substance. So you take cocaine, your body creates a specific enzyme or a specific antigen for that cocaine. It doesn't create that thing for anything else in the chemical world. So the instant test is set to react specifically to that antigen and say, oh, nope, that antigen's not here. We see our dye, we see our negative, whatever it might be. Or we say, the antigen was there, and now we have our positive result. We block the dye from coming through. We have our positive result. And it's great. It's quick. It's easy. But we're going to talk about some of the things that do limit it and why it still makes sense for confirmation. So again, immunoassay is an immune response based on the human body's response to any type of chemical or substance or molecule that enters the body, even the stuff that's good for you. It's not just about fentanyl and, diesel exhaust. Sorry, I have a thing against diesel exhaust. Just hate getting stuck behind a truck. Anyway, the difference between a screen and a confirmation, And by the way, the screen, whether it's done via laboratory, via an instant cup, via, like I said, EIA, or which is an enzyme immunolinked assay machine, these are all still that same chemical reaction in order to get our results. And as such, like I said, there are some shortcomings. So enter the confirmation. So confirmatory lab tests, and the two main ways that we confirm specimens in a laboratory are either via GCMS, which is gas chromatography mass spectrometry, and then we have LCMS, which is liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. You may have even heard the term tandem LCMS, which means they run spectrometer twice, basically, which is kind of silly because they do it on all of them. There is going to be an argument, if you go out to dinner with a couple of clinical toxicologists, they might bore you to death with an argument whether a gas chromatograph is better than a liquid chromatograph, but the end result is still the same. The chromatograph separates the molecules away from one another, and then the spectrometer measures them, usually by bouncing off heat, light, and energy. They are able to look at a very specific molecule, know exactly what that molecule is, and then quantify that molecule. What was the concentration of this molecule in the specimen that we provided? So basically, every molecule has its own unique fingerprint, is really the best way to describe it. They're all incredibly unique, and it makes it so it's almost impossible for the GCMS to look at one thing and think it's something else. It just doesn't work that way. That's not the way this equipment works. And this is the same equipment they use to tell you how far away a star is, how old a star is, what it's made up of. So it's incredibly accurate, incredibly precise. And that's another reason why we like to see this, especially with my little scare tactic about going to court with it, because no, GCMS, it's not wrong. It's never wrong. Sorry, attorney so-and-so, you are wrong, basically. So that at the base of it, that is why it's important, because it's a different methodology. One is a chemical method, one is a visual method. So when you look at the instructions, like I first mentioned, a lot of them just simply say a different methodology. So that's where the visual result comes into play versus the chemical result. So what can it really tell us? So now that we understand what the difference is, what else can confirmation really tell us that might be useful besides just trying to scare us for some reason? So the first and foremost for me would be prescribed medications. So there are a lot of drugs of abuse that are simply prescribed medications that people using without a prescription, misusing in other different ways, but basically it's using without a prescription. So let's take, for example, benzodiazepines. So on an instant cup and most other screening devices, your benzodiazepine panel is going to react to about 14 or 16 different benzodiazepines. So let's say, for example, you have someone in your program, participant, whatever it might be, patient, whatever it might be, and they have a prescription for Xanax. They've been giving you a positive on their benzo panel and bringing you this prescription from their doctor for Xanax. By the way, generic for that is alprazolam, because I'll use those interchangeably. Sorry. So let's say somebody is taking alprazolam. They have a prescription for it. It's all good. But you might have concerns that their friend gave them a Valium or a Klonopin or anything like that. So while looking at the results from the screen, the instant screen, it's not going to tell you which benzo was present in that specimen. So if they're taking Xanax that they're prescribed, and their buddy's like, hey, have a couple of Valium. So if you send that specimen to the laboratory, you'll see, there's our alprazolam, which is the Xanax. There's our 7-amino alprazolam, which is the metabolite of Xanax. And I'll tell you more about metabolites down the road or in a little bit. Here is diazepam and chlorodiazepam. Neither of those things would be there if somebody was only taking Xanax. So that would indicate to you that somebody is indeed misusing a substance that they do not have a prescription for. So that's one of them. There's a couple of other examples here, like amphetamine I listed. We still have very few prescription amphetamines, but we do have Adderall, for example. So if somebody's taking a street amphetamine, which I know really aren't popular now, but it could happen, you would know, looking at which amphetamine was present, whether it was legitimate use from the prescription or whether it was misuse. And then we'll take it a step further with the oxycodone and hydrocodone. Oxycodone, and oxymorphone are great. They may react on either the opiate or the oxy panel. So it's important to then send it to the laboratory and see if it is indeed for the drug that they've been prescribed, or if they've decided to, hey, I'm already taking this, they'll never know kind of thing. 'Cause I hear that every week, if not every day. So that's number one. You get an idea of the exact substance depending on, inside that drug class, and make sure it's the one that they're taking via prescription instead of misusing. Next would be drug levels. So I see some familiar names. I know you guys have heard me say this before, that level means almost nothing. And I stand by that. But there's the almost there, and that's our qualifier, because I'm going to show you the few places where level really can make a difference in the results that you're viewing. The first and foremost is going to be THC over time. So THC, probably the most common misused drug, is also one of the ones that take the longest to metabolize, completely excrete out of the body. Because of this, we're in a unique position to be able to track this level over time and make sure that it's actually going down. You can't do it with cocaine, because by the time you collect the specimen 2 days later, it should already be at zero. Chronic fentanyl use, okay, maybe a week later, it should be zero, that kind of thing. And I'm going to get more detail on that for you. But really, probably the best thing that level can do for most of you is going to be to monitor THC over time, to monitor for whether it's continued abstinence or whether there's been new use. So that is very important there. And then the other thing you can do is, by knowing the parent drug versus the metabolite, and that's going to be the next slide, don't worry, I'm not going to get too far ahead of you guys. By knowing the parent versus the metabolite, we can sometimes get an idea of when the usage was. So let's talk about that a little bit. Excuse me. So first, let's talk about metabolization. So metabolization, like I mentioned on the first slide, with the in regards to those enzymes coming up to greet that vitamin C when it came into your body, those enzymes are going to take that vitamin C, they're going to place it where they can, wherever part of your body can actually use the vitamin C, and the rest of it starts to metabolize into waste byproduct. Now, that waste byproduct is also very consistent and very measurable. And in fact, most screens of tests are going to really target that metabolite, the drug that your body, the substance that your body turned that drug into. I've got a list here to give you an idea. For example, when you take fentanyl, your body will also turn that into norfentanyl. When you take heroin, your body turns it into 6-MAM and morphine. When you take oxycodone, oxymorphone comes out. When you take cocaine, it's metabolite. I'm never going to pronounce that for you guys. Don't even ask. Amphetamines is a unique class because ecstasy metabolizes into methamphetamine, which further metabolizes into amphetamine. So there's two steps in that one. And then lastly on my list here is methadone, which metabolizes into EDDP. This one's a little tricky just because some people metabolize this substance a little strange. Got a blog post on it, but hit me up, obviously, if you want more information on methadone metabolisms. But now that we have an idea of what metabolization is and what a metabolite is, again, the opposite of that is the parent compound, which is the drug that you've ingested. So, example, you take fentanyl, you're gonna have fentanyl show in your specimen, and then eventually you're gonna have norfentanyl show in your system. So let me explain how we can kind of take that and relate it to when the use was. So when you first take a substance, usually the initial day or two. Now, listen, I'm going to give you very broad dates here. Every drug is a little bit different in the way and the speed in which it metabolizes. Every human body is a little bit different in the way it metabolizes and the way it purges toxins from its body. And some of the drugs listed aren't what I would consider, some of these drugs are straight on street drugs. You don't know if you took a 0.25 of Xanax. If you're doing cocaine, you don't know the potency and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of factors involved in determining the parent versus metabolite as far as the time frame. So do keep that in mind. I'm going to use very loose dating, but I'm going to go ahead and go with fentanyl just because it's on the top of everybody's mind these days. So let's say today I took some fentanyl just now when we started this webinar. For the first day or two, and again, using very loose time frame here. For the first day, maybe day and a half, 2 days, the only thing you would find in my specimen is fentanyl. As you start into the second day, you're going to start to see some norfentanyl creep into my specimen. And at some point, the level of norfentanyl is going to cross the level of fentanyl in my specimen. And then eventually the fentanyl is going to drop off and it's no longer going to be detected, but the test is still going to detect the norfentanyl. So again, most tests are detecting both the parent and the metabolite. So now we're 3-4 days after their use. We don't know that. Just know that we now have a positive on their fentanyl panel 4 to 5 days after use. We know they were positive before they left on weekend pass. Now they're home after the weekend and they're positive still. Was there a new use, or is this still the metabolite working its way out of the system? That's another reason that a laboratory confirmation would come into play. You'd be able to look at the ratio of fentanyl versus norfentanyl, or even if there is any fentanyl versus the norfentanyl, and you will have a sort of range, again, not specific, not 7 p.m. Friday night, you will have a sort of range of when that fentanyl was. Is there new use since we let them last? So that kind of thing. So that accounts to pretty much all of these. Like I said, cocaine doesn't necessarily apply because it's gone in 2 days anyway. By the time you run another test, it should be negative or it's definitely new use. But for the most part, you can get a loose idea of when somebody's last used. All right, next on our list is sort of a very unique situation. This is one of the few substances that are commonly misused where somebody may want to give somebody that they have been taking the medication as opposed to not taking it. And that we're talking about buprenorphine. Most commonly used these days in Suboxone and Subutex still, I believe they're still the top two. So what happens here is buprenorphine is a medication-assisted treatment for people who are, opioid misusers, and it is supposed to be replacement therapy to some extent. So they'll give you a medication that you could take daily. So while you may not be completely clean of opioids in your system, it allows you to change your lifestyle to work your way away from the lifestyle of finding street drugs. So we could argue back and forth for a million years about whether medication-assisted treatment is good, bad, or ugly. I don't want to get into a debate with you. I think that anything that helps somebody kick a habit and live a better life is good. But I'm sure there are differing opinions on there anyway. So sorry. Anyway, people who come to a doctor, a buprenorphine doctor, will get a prescription for this medication, and it's usually a 30-day supply. When they go back to the doctor's office to renew their prescription, the doctor is going to want to make sure that they've been taking their medication. They whip out a test cup or desktop analyzer. They run the test. They say, oh, good, you're positive on our buprenorphine panel. Therefore, we can give you your next 30-day prescription. The problem is that there are a lot of buprenorphine patients who would rather sell their buprenorphine or trade it for their opioid of choice. So what they do in that case, when they're going back to their doctor for another prescription, to renew their prescription, they will take a little piece of their medication, whether it's a Suboxone sublingual film or a sublingual tablet. Dissolves pretty easily. It's meant to dissolve easily. If they're careful, they can break off a little piece and dissolve it into their specimen. So now when the doctor gets the cup, they say, okay, good, it's positive for buprenorphine. Well, you really don't know. You know that it's positive for buprenorphine, but is it positive for a specimen of somebody who has been taking their buprenorphine? That's another good thing for the laboratory to take a hold of. They'll be able to look at the specimen and tell us, yes, there is both buprenorphine and the metabolite norbuprenorphine in this specimen. Therefore, we can confirm that this medication was indeed ingested. So that can be huge right there. If we know the medication's been ingested, then you know that you're prescribing somebody medication which they're taking correctly. I didn't recognize any doctor names on here, but y'all who are working medical, you know how important it is for a doctor to, when he gives you a prescription, he really wants you to take it as directed. I've been yelled at by my doctor because I've missed my blood pressure meds from time to time. So they take that seriously, especially if they're being monitored by the DEA for prescribing narcotics. Anyway, that's kind of unique. No other drug is really like that, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. And then lastly, another big reason for sending a laboratory testing is there is such a thing as cross-reactivity. It does exist. You've all heard of false positives. It's not a made-up word. It really does happen. Now, there's some that we definitely know of, and I'm going to go over those with you real quick, but not everything is known. Not every combination of drugs can be tested in a laboratory setting. And even if it could, not everybody's physiology is the same. Some people metabolize things differently. So, for example, our first example here on the cross-reactivity screen here is busbarone or Buspar, which can cause a false positive on the fentanyl panel. Not for everybody. Most people, when they take busbarone or Buspar, the antigen or the antibody their body creates is identical to the one that they create would they have ingested fentanyl. So that's why we see so often a cross-reactivity. It's not that the test can't distinguish between the two. It's just that the antigen that the body made in reaction to these two different substances, even though they're wildly different, your body reaction to these two substances was similar enough that a screen was not able to differentiate between the two, and it ended up having that same chemical reaction that you would have had it been the actual target substance. So again, busbarone or Buspar for fentanyl, that's one of them. Check with me because there is a new version. There's a new class of fentanyl tests, for the lack of a better term, or a new version 2.0, that reacts to trazodone instead of busbarone. But either one of those, let me know if you're unsure. And again, always feel free to reach out. That's the big takeaway here, is always feel free to reach out and ask more questions. For number 2, for methamphetamine, we have ranitidine. Ranitidine, which is Zantac, an over-the-counter acid reflux, for acid reflux medication. For our methadone panel, there's a medication or a substance called doxylamine. Doxylamine is the sleepy part of Unisom and NyQuil. You'll see it especially in the winter. People in cold and flu season see a lot of false positives on methadone from that. On our oxycodone panel, we have naltrexone is the main one. Especially with the popularity of Vivitrol shots, we're seeing a lot more comments or questions about cross-reactivity on the oxycodone panel. And then finally, on the PCP panel, we have both, Lamitrigine, which is Lamictal, and the other one is Effexor. I can't pronounce that brand name. I'm not going to try. Venlafaxine? Yeah. I'll just stay Effexor. So these are all known cross-reactants. So another reason why, let's say, for example, somebody comes to you and they have a prescription for busbarone, and now you're getting positive fentanyl tests. Well, how do you know that they're not also taking fentanyl? They've already given you a bunch of positive tests. They know they're going to be positive whether or not they take fentanyl, especially if opioids have been their drug of choice. It's basically an open door for someone to go, oh, I'll just do that then. So that's another reason why this is important. And then lastly, as I always say, of course, we're a drug testing company. We offer all of the confirmations for all of this, all the different specimen types. Obviously, urine testing. I loosely mentioned oral fluid testing, mentioned sweat patch testing, mentioned hair testing. These are all viable specimen type, although not everything we discussed today applies to all these specimen types. So just to make sure you understand that I don't want you to think, oh, sweat patch, great. Or hair testing, great. They'll catch this fentanyl. No, they won't. So do check if there's questions. And again, the focus was really mainly on urine today. And again, if you have questions, obviously just let me know. All right, great. Looks like we got some questions. Of course, my camera is blocking the questions tab. Some results in the UDS come with a number. Can this number be used for quantitative results? Deborah, I'm not sure. I've seen something called semi-quantitative, like our saliva alcohol tests, where there's a pad that will turn a color that kind of gives you a range. The only exception other than that I've seen, an adulterant obviously too, because that's based on a scaling. The only other exception I've seen to that is one of the labs that we work with. By the way, we work with a bunch of labs that can offer all these things. So, you don't have to use ours, but know that we can offer it. One of the labs that we use for toxicology testing, they will report a quantitative number, an actual level on their THC screen, but they've warned me multiple times it's really just a cumulative number. It's not the number you would want to use to monitor for abstinence. It's just really, it's almost like a loose level range, more like semi-quantitative. False negatives needs to be confirmed. Also, yes, that's absolutely true. Another excellent, mention there, Deborah. If somebody admits use and you're getting a negative, that's good information to find out why you're getting a negative. Maybe the specimen was really dilute that day and it just kind of watered it down so that there wasn't a high enough concentration for it to give you a positive result. Maybe somebody said, I took heroin this morning and it's negative for you 5 minutes ago. Maybe it wasn't heroin. Maybe it was fentanyl. Maybe it wasn't the drug that they thought that they were taking. We see that a lot too. Jerry Benson, we use screens and sometimes send to a lab, which probably doesn't use a GCMS confirmation method. Some samples have conflicting. Yeah, this is a big problem I have. Do we have time to get into this? I hate to keep everybody here too long. This is a big problem I have. It's usually with the bigger guys like Quest and LabCorp. So what happens there is they like to do what's called screen and confirm. So you send them the specimen blindly. They do their screen. Anything they screen positive, they will then confirm. And it's not a bad idea, especially if you're in a situation where you just don't have time to run an instant test, read the results, consider what that might mean, fill out the lab form, whatever it might be. So I'm not going to complain about that way of doing things. It's just they're not always very clear about it. So the one problem that I have is their cutoff levels. Most screening cutoff levels that you see in a laboratory these days are not as low as the screening cutoff that you see on an instant test. So for example, our instant cup, our most popular one, has a THC cutoff of 25 nanograms per milliliter. Well, a laboratory typically sticks with the old standards, which is 50 nanograms per milliliter. So you get a positive on your cup, send it to the lab for confirmation. They screen it first at 50 and they say, nope, we didn't see any THC. We're not confirming it. We don't do it that way. So yeah, that is very much a problem. So Jerry, if you have a consultant already, I'll make sure they reach out to you to follow up with this. I don't know if there's a way that whatever lab you are using, you can kind of talk them out of this, but if not, we can discuss it and find out if there really is a way. Let's see. Ron Williams, there's no way, if somebody's taking their medications as prescribed or misusing. Correct. That is another, I don't want to call it a misconception because it's usually more of a question. Levels in urine will give you zero evidence of somebody using their drugs as prescribed or misusing them. Where there are substances where that needs to be monitored, methadone comes to mind, they typically take a blood test, and it's got to be at the same time of day and at the same length of time after their dosage as the last test. And that's because you want to have a certain level of some drugs consistent in your bloodstream for them to function as they should. So yeah, you'll not know by looking at a lab result level, unfortunately, but that's a good question. Thank you. Have you had many false positive for the AMP? They're taking trazodone. No, I haven't, and it's weird. One of the labs we work with still will give me back when there's a negative on the amphetamine. They'll still report a trazodone positive. So I guess that's kind of old school, where trazodone was very commonly cross-reacting on the amphetamine panel, but I just really don't see it in modern day. So it might have just been an older version of a test. Yes, thanks. Cutoff levels differ. Yeah, exactly, Jerry. Yeah, I kind of had a feeling that would be the case. So doesn't surprise me. I like when I get one right. So All right, looks like that's all the questions. And there's somebody in the chat. Let's make sure it's not a question I'm asking. Provide a copy of the handouts. Yes. Thank you very much. Number one, I think I forgot to mention this at the beginning. There will be a recording of this webinar posted on our website. Usually gets up within a day or two. So if any of your colleagues missed out, you can share the recording with them. And then, yes, I will be able to find your comment, and it'll be attached to your email, Shanetta. So I'll be able to forward you, or one of us will be able to forward you a copy of our slideshow here. And hopefully that's good information for you. And then, as always, if you have more questions than that, please reach out. You see all our contact information here at info@NTS-Biz. And listen, again, I see some familiar names here. I've talked to most of you guys, so you know how to find me. I'm not hard to find. All right, listen, I want to thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. I know I went a little bit longer than normal. I really appreciate it. I try not to keep you guys here too long because, like I said, you guys have work to do. So again, thank you very much. And until next time, keep on testing.